In 1982, Yoshiki Tanaka published the first part of his science fiction novel series, The Legend of the Galactic Heroes. The story is set in the far future, and the political power has moved away from the planet Earth into the Galactic Federation. A dictatorial politician declares himself emperor, and the Galactic Federation is turned into an empire. He starts to crack down on the opposition and implements draconian policies, for example by exterminating the weakest members of the society, according to his belief in eugenics. Later on, a group of serfs escape their bondage, and after a great voyage, the refugees find planets where they will establish the Free Planets Alliance, a democratic republic. As time passes on, the Empire and the Alliance become locked in conflict, and the story of the novel series follows Commodore Yang Wen-Li, a gifted military officer on the Alliance side, and the ambitious Reinhard von Lohengrin, an up-and-coming military genius of the Empire. Yang Wen-Li is facing a dilemma. He is a true believer of the democratic ideal, but the Free Planets Alliance is in a sorry state, as it has fallen prey to corruption and poor leadership, while the political power has slowly concentrated to the hands of a profit-seeking elites. Yang manages to keep the imperial forces at bay, often just by his wits alone, as he often practically has to squeeze water out of rocks in order to get through the day. His successes end up breeding false confidence in the Alliance leadership, which leads to foolish military operations that have not been thought through. These adventures are bound to fail from the start and just worsen the already unstable state of the Alliance. For example, one of the main roads from Empire to Alliance is a tight bottleneck that is surrounded by asteroid fields, and the route is blocked by a powerful Imperial military base. This base is a constant worry for the Alliance, but Yang Wen-Li manages to capture it by trickery and deceit. The leaders of the Alliance become drunk by their falsely perceived military might, and they send warships to the Empire in order to free, in air quotes, planets from the Imperial side. The Empire knows that this is an impossible task, and so does Yang, as the Imperial territory is too vast and the Alliance military has no resources to occupy all these planets, let alone reform and administer them. The Empire just waits until Alliance warships are spread apart enough, then it swoops in and destroys most of them. Many Alliance politicians resign from their posts after this debacle. Yang Wen-Li is constantly pulling his hair out of his head from frustration and despair. On the Imperial side, there is a great shift happening too. The history of the Empire is long, and there have been all sorts of phases and emperors along the years, in the same way as the Roman Empire, for example. Now the leadership is mediocre, but the prodigal son, Reinhard von Lohengrin, is rising through the ranks. He is not from the best of aristocratic families, so he is seen as an outsider and an upstart. So in order to gain political power, Reinhard supports the masses and is ready to implement many needed social reform programs to gain their favor, as the other nobles won't support him. Reinhard becomes the new emperor after a brief civil war, and a new golden age for the Empire is dawning under his enlightened rule. Yang Wen-Li agonizes under this paradox. Reinhard just wants power, and in his position the best route just happens to benefit the people in general. But he really doesn't care about the great public per se. The Alliance itself is supposed to ideologically be for the greater good, but it is anything but and rots inside out. In a wonderfully poignant scene, Yang is attending a ceremony where he is bestowed the most valued medals for his distinguished service for the Alliance. Yang couldn't care less, and he hates the sleazy politicians to their guts. The man he hates the most, the slimy populist Job Trunic, is the one who gives Yang his award. Still, despite his aversion to the man, Yang becomes enchanted by Trunic's honeyed words. Catching himself, Yang becomes extremely upset and is thoroughly disappointed in himself. Depressed, he wonders if there really is even any point in democracy, if you will, in the end, just have corrupt leaders like Trunic at the helm, who will only seek to enrich themselves at the price of everything else. Yang's attempts to fight for democracy just enable these sorts of people, and as his enemy, Yang faces the extremely competent Reinhard, a man he could at least respect, and in another time they probably would have been friends. Yang reasons that nothing lasts forever. All the empires and kingdoms in history have crumbled, and he just has ended up in a time period of decay and the death of one sort of a system. There is a looming doubt in his mind that only empires can be the sort of systems that can spring up again and again, as democracies will succumb to these same tendencies and they will become autocratic at some point or another. Young accepts his lot in life, does his job, and aims to retire as soon as possible. I have read 7 of the 10 novels in the series, so I don't know how the story ends. I haven't watched the TV show that was made after the book series. The train of thought in the novels is right now very timely. The rules-based order of international law that was started by the United States of America is disintegrating, as the US is reverting back to naked old-school imperialism. You could very well argue that international law has always been to the US just whatever they have wanted anyway, but the ideal is now publicly trampled down, without any sort of justification, no matter how flimsy. Besides these sorts of political repercussions, another sign to an end of an era is the environmental crisis. According to a lot of estimates, the oil in the world will be spent in the next 40 to 50 years. The question rises that what will happen after that? I only have a layman's conception about these issues, so I don't have anything too enlightened to say about it. But my 2-cent guess would be that we move to nuclear power totally as the oil, coal and gas are spent. But what about all the products that use plastic and other materials that need oil so we can produce them? Unless a substitute of some sort is produced, most of the things that we use today can no longer be available. What will happen to the economy as everything is based on selling, buying and producing stuff, if we no longer can make stuff to sell? I wonder if we will go back to a lifestyle that is much closer to the 1800s than the previous century. And only the elites have access to technologies such as computers, as they no longer can be produced for everybody. Many people are now questioning that what the regular people will do as AI and robots take over. But the next question for me is that do we even have enough resources on this planet to have our world run by machines indefinitely? Will there just be a phase of this until we are forced to go by horse and carriage, just like before in human history? Your guess is as good as mine, but like Young Lee said, nothing lasts forever. Death by itself is a constant we tell about each other in the stories we produce, no matter what the time period. The game Final Fantasy VII was inspired by the death of the series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's mother. In the game, the world produces a semi-spiritual energy source called Mako that is being extracted by a huge industrial conglomerate, Shinra Electric Company. This is causing great environmental destruction, and an eco-activist group called Avalanche starts destroying the reactors that extract Mako. The main character, Cloud, is a soldier who used to work in an elite operator squad for Shinra, but now he is a mercenary hired by Avalanche. As the story progresses, Cloud learns that Sephiroth, the greatest soldier Shinra ever produced, is still alive, and he was the one who destroyed Cloud's hometown. They also discover that Shinra is after the Promised Land, a land of ancient myths, that supposedly holds great amounts of Mako, and it is tied to the almost completely wiped-out race of the Cetra. One of the characters, Aerith, the main love interest for Cloud, is the last survivor of her species. The story starts out as creating a protagonist and antagonist relationship between Cloud and Sephiroth, and there are elements of a classic Chosen One story with Aerith. However, everything ends up in a horrible disaster. Aerith is killed by Sephiroth, and it turns out that Cloud's memories are twisted and fake. He never was part of the elite soldier squad, and was just a regular infantry member, being a side casualty in the destruction of his hometown. There never was a relationship between him and Sephiroth. They were never equals, and him and the other heroes were just manipulated to do the antagonist's bidding. With the Chosen One dead, Sephiroth uses ultimate magic to summon a meteor to wipe the Earth clean. Cloud ends up in a catatonic state. With the help of another party member, Cloud's psyche gets reconstructed via the mystic power of the planet's life energy. Following a theme of Buddhist enlightenment, Cloud learns to see himself in true light, thus coming to terms with himself and his failures, being set free. But Aerith is dead and gone, and the impact from the approaching meteor is guaranteed. The heroes do what they can to possibly save the world in the last-ditch effort, and that done, they go on a final journey to kill Sephiroth, even though that very possibly won't help at all. As a kid playing the game, I always appreciated its frankness. You really weren't anybody important after all, and everything was messed up. A lot of the music, areas and atmosphere in the game are comfortless and desolate. The characters accept their lot, go say goodbye to their loved ones and do what they can. The end of the game is the meteor hitting the planet, and the end credits roll. After that, you are treated to a sequence in the far future, where you see some life, although not humans, running around the plains and looking at the destroyed techno-city of Midgar, which is ran over by plant life. Everything ends at some point is the message here too, although we hopefully did something right along the way. Existential themes continued in the series with Final Fantasy IX. In the game, the bandit group Tantalus is hired to kidnap the princess of the Kingdom of Alexandria. Surprisingly, the Princess Garnet actually wants to escape her kingdom, as something is going on with her mother, Queen Brane, who has become suddenly aggressive and wants to expand the domains of her kingdom. One of the bandits, Zidane, starts to help her out in discovering what is going on. Along the group of the heroes is a black mage, Vivi, a strange creature who isn't sure about his origins. As the story unfolds, it turns out that there are other black mages that are somehow manufactured and they are being used as soulless golems as magical soldiers. The man who creates the black mages, a weapons merchant Kuya, is using the greed of the queen to set the kingdoms of the planet against each other. Vivi was a prototype and the black mages have only a limited lifespan. Vivi and the other black mages are horrified of the purpose of their existence and the sudden mortality they are faced with. Kuya himself has been manufactured by another entity, Garland, who is another artificial soul, whose task is to revive his dying world Terra by absorbing into it other planets. Kuya has been sent to this planet in order to weaken it, but he is scheming to fight against Garland. He too, however, learns that his lifespan is also very limited. Lashing out, he tries to destroy everything, the planet along with him. Many of the characters in the game have their long-held beliefs crushed. The lords they served were in reality corrupt and ruthless. Love interests don't pan out and many can't deal with their mortality. There is a loss of purpose and a suffocating helplessness as the characters are forced to stare into the void. There is a happy ending to the game, a little bittersweet one, and it comes maybe a little irrationally. But the message the writers wanted to deliver was supposed to be life-affirming, in front of all life's tragedies and misfortunes. These stories are all very modern, so it is interesting to look at the first story ever told, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which dates back roughly 4,000 years. The king Gilgamesh, who rules over Uruk, the first city of Mesopotamia, is oppressing his people. In his strength, he does what he wants to whoever he wants, as no one can match his might. The gods decide to put a stop to this, and they create Enkidu, another great man, who could be equal to Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh meets Enkidu, they do battle and grapple with each other, but when Gilgamesh defeats Enkidu, he is overjoyed that there is finally someone who can truly be his equal, and they become best friends, blood brothers. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu set out against all the greatest dangers the world has to offer, overcoming themselves beyond their wildest expectations, and slay monsters that no one has dared to face before. Unthoughtfully, they insult one of the gods, Ishtar, and as revenge, Enkidu is given a fatal disease. As Enkidu wastes away and dies, Gilgamesh is stricken by grief. His greatest friend is now gone, never to come back, just like that, and even though he himself is the greatest man who ever lived, a man who has achieved and overcome everything, he realizes that he, too, can die away just like that. Terrified, Gilgamesh sets out to the land of the dead in order to ask for immortality. He finds Utnapishtim, the one immortal man, who was given eternal life as thanks as he was the one who built a giant boat to save one animal of each kind before the great flood hit the earth and killed everything else. Utnapishtim explains to Gilgamesh that asking for immortality really is impossible, as his own case was a special one because of the flood. He, however, tells that there is a rose that can restore one's youth, and tells Gilgamesh where it is. Finding and getting the rose, Gilgamesh rests. While he sleeps, a snake comes and devours the rose. Gilgamesh wakes up to realize what has happened, and the snake sheds its skin as an act of renewal. The rose was one of its kind, and it is now lost forever. Finally, accepting the lot of man in life, Gilgamesh travels back to Uruk, as man cannot escape his mortality. The problem of death has vexed man from the start, and the idea of the beyond, of the things we cannot see, has partially been established in order for us to create a space that aims to fix the situation. In the Upanishads, which belong to the sacred texts of Hinduism. One part tells the story of Nachiketa. He is just a boy, but very aware of religious issues. His father has given away their possessions to earn religious merit, but Nachiketa questions this, as he wonders what merit there is to give away cows that are too old to give milk. Irritated, the father tells that what he really is offering is his son to death himself. With this instruction, Nachiketa decides to visit Yama, the king of death, since he is going to go that way someday anyway. Arriving at Yama's house, he has to wait for 3 days for the god of death to come back, since he is away on business. Once Yama comes back, Nachiketa reminds his host about the importance of hospitality. Yama agrees and decides to give Nachiketa 3 wishes because he had to wait for so long. Nachiketa asks for Yama to calm his father down so he would welcome Nachiketa back with open arms, and Yama grants this wish. Next, Nachiketa wants to learn how to worship fire the correct way, since this is the most important element in the creation of the world, and correct worship will lead its worshippers to heaven. Yama grants this too. But then Nachiketa says that he truly wishes to understand the nature of death. When a person dies, there arises this doubt. He still exists, say some. He does not, say others. I want you to teach me the truth, Nachiketa says. Yama says that Nachiketa could ask for anything else in the world, since this is the one thing he really can't answer. Yama offers all sorts of worldly pleasures to Nachiketa instead, but Nachiketa sighs and says that all of that is worthless, since all pleasure is fleeting and he knows that he will die one day. Impressed by the young boy's clarity of vision, Yama decides to instruct Nachiketa. It is true that fleeting pleasures are not the way to go, and they make man forget the goal of life. What should be done instead is to realize the self. The intellect cannot reveal the self, beyond its duality of subject and object. Those who see themselves in all and all in them help others through spiritual osmosis to realize the self themselves. The wise realizing through meditation the timeless self, beyond all perception, hidden in the cave of the heart, leave pain and pleasure far behind. Those who know that they are neither body nor mind but the immemorial self, the divine principle of existence, find the source of all joy and live in joy abiding. The word Om is the symbol of the Godhead. Realizing it, one finds complete fulfillment of all one's longings. It is of the greatest support to all seekers. When Om reverberates unceasingly within the heart, that one is indeed blessed and deeply loved as one who is the Self. The all-knowing Self was never born, nor will it die. Beyond cause and effect, the Self is eternal and immutable. When the body dies, the Self does not die. If the slayer believes that he can kill, or the slain believes that he can be killed, neither knows the truth. The eternal Self slays not, nor is ever slain. Hidden in the heart of every creature exists the Self, subtler than the subtlest, greater than the greatest. They go beyond all sorrow who extinguish their self-will and behold the glory of the Self. Though one sits in meditation in a particular place, the Self within can exercise his influence far away, though still he moves everything everywhere. When the wise realize the Self, formless in the midst of forms, changeless in the midst of change, omnipresent and supreme, they go beyond sorrow. The Self cannot be known through study of the scriptures, nor through the intellect, nor through hearing discourses about it. The Self can be attained only by those whom the Self chooses. In the secret cave of the heart, two are seated by life's fountain. The separate ego drinks of the sweet and bitter stuff, liking the sweet, disliking the bitter, while the Supreme Self drinks sweet and bitter, neither liking this nor disliking that. The ego gropes in the darkness, while the Self lives in light. The senses derive from objects of sense perception, sense objects from mind, mind from intellect, and intellect from ego, ego from undifferentiated consciousness, and consciousness from Brahman. Brahman is the first cause and last refuge. Brahman, the hidden Self in everyone, does not shine forth. He is revealed only to those who keep their minds one-pointed on the Lord of Love, and thus develop a superconscious manner of knowing. Meditation enables them to go deeper and deeper into consciousness, from the world of words to world of thoughts, then beyond thoughts to wisdom in the self. When all desires that surge in the heart are renounced, the mortal becomes immortal. When all the knots that strangle the heart are loosened, the mortal becomes immortal. This sums up the teaching of the scriptures. With this instruction, death can be defeated, since it just controls the surface elements of reality, not its core. Such is the model of Vedanta philosophy, written around 800 to 500 BCE. Other attempts have been made across history in different cultures. A more recent one was developed by Russian philosopher Nikolai Fedorov, who lived from 1829 to 1903. Fedorov lived ascetically, giving away most of his salary to those in need. He believed that man would someday perfect itself, believing in a science fiction future, where we would colonize the galaxy and defeat death itself. In the treatise What Was Man Created For?, Fedorov sketches out his model for humanity. Quote, "The problem is how to find a way out of the unbrotherly state. The metamorphosis of a mob into a union of sons who find their unity in a common task does not entail loss of identity. By sharing in this task, every man becomes a great man, because he participates in the greatness of the tasks, incomparably greater than those who have been called great men. Those who reject the veneration of ancestors are depriving themselves of the right to be called sons of man. Instead of participating in the common task, they become the organs, the tools of various industries, mere cogs, however much they may think they live for themselves. In such a state, no one can assert that eternal existence of individuals X or Y has any exceptional importance or even any sense, so that it might have been better for them not to exist at all. This, of course, refers only to X and Y. It cannot refer to the sons of man, the participators in resurrection, whose existence is not only vitally important but absolutely indispensable, if the purpose of life is to transform blind force of nature into one governed by the reason of all the generations brought back to life. Then, of course, each and every one is indispensable. In rejecting philanthropy and accepting Darwinism, the present century has accepted struggle as a legitimate occupation, thus endowing a blind tool of nature with a conscious purpose. True religion is the cult of ancestors, the cult of all the fathers as one father inseparable from the triune God, yet not merged with him. In him the indissoluble union of all sons and daughters with the fathers is divinized, while they still retain their individuality. To abdicate universality is to distort a religion. It is characteristic of pagan religions which venerated only the gods and ancestors of their own nations, and even of those Christian denominations which restrict salvation to those of their ancestors who were baptized. Separating our forefathers from the triune God is a distortion of religion, as is the limitation of its universality. God confirms the truth that religion is the cult of ancestors by calling himself the God of the fathers. We have no right to separate our fathers from God, or God from our fathers. Neither have we right to merge them with him, that is to say, to permit their absorption, which would mean merging God and nature, nor to limit the circle of fathers to our own tribe or race. The doctrine of the Trinity divinizes the universality of religion and its Catholicity, as well as the indivisibility of the fathers and God, while remaining unmerged. Therefore, it condemns not only segregation and division, but also deism, which separates God from the fathers, and pantheism, which merges them with God. Both deism and pantheism lead to atheism, that is, to the acceptance of a blind force and its veneration, and submission to it venerating a blind force, assuming it to be alive. Such worship and deification are not religion but mere distortion, while the present subservience to a blind force is a negation of religion. It engenders either practical technology manufacturers or its diabolical military application to destruction. The negation of religion consists in using the blind force not for true and good purposes but for evil ones. To submit to it under the guise of mastering it is to submit to sexual selection through the manufacturers, and to natural selection through all types of destruction. Serving God entails transforming the blind, death-bearing force into a life-giving one by controlling it. Nature is regarded as death-bearing, self-destructive force, but not because of its blindness. Yet, where can a blind force lead except to death? Humans admit nature to be a blind force even when they regard themselves as part of it, and accept death as a kind of law and not as a mere accident which has permeated nature and become its organic vice. Yet death is merely the result or manifestation of our infantilism, lack of independence and self-reliance, and of our incapacity for mutual support and the restoration of life. People are still minors, half beings, whereas the fullness of personal existence, personal perfection is possible. However, it is possible only within general perfection. Coming of age will bring perfect health and immortality, but for the living, immortality is impossible without the resurrection of the dead. The highest virtues were supposed to be directed towards the growth and annihilation of death, but now it is wasted. Death is a property, a state conditioned by causes. It is not a quality which determines what a human being is and must be." End quote. The age of modern technology had already created many heady ideas in the 19th century. The age of modern technology had already created many heady ideas in the 19th century, ideas that seem ludicrous to us now, but like the ancient Chinese emperors who sought the elixir of immortality, not much has changed. Putin and Xi Jinping were caught discussing about the extension of one's natural life by organ transplants, and Peter Thiel has talked about cryofreezing and other methods to cheat death. So many of these stories are about facing the fact of mortality and making your peace with it, and in part religion holds the promise of something better after everything is said and done. But can we actually have this peace and acceptance, or is it just as fantastical as the science fiction and fantasy elements of these stories? Thanks for listening, have a good one.